Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish Therapist, a real-life therapist turned pop culture aficionado, serving clinical interpretations and hot takes on all things pop culture. And today, I am so honored to have one of my most favorite people back with me from Vanderpodrecaps. Please join me in welcoming back Lyndsay Lime. Welcome, Lyndsay.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back and to chat with you again.
I am so happy for you to be back too, because I think it's a couple things. People really love you and me together and Mandy and I together. And you both have very soothing tones of voice.
Oh, thank you.
Both of you. So not only are you amazingly smart and talented and funny, you both have the best voices. So I am so grateful you're back.
That is so kind because I think a lot of people say this about their own voice, but I hate my voice. Mm-hmm. Whenever I hear it, I'm like, who is that? I don't sound like that. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. And I will say for people out there listening is that I used to hate the sound of my own voice. And I just hear it incessantly now because of what I'm doing and talking to myself and recording myself. But it just goes to show that sometimes we're so hard on ourselves because people love the sound of my voice, but I didn't used to enjoy it. So, here's to self-love, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right, everybody. So today what we're going to be talking about is we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about Real Housewives of Orange County. Now, by the time this airs, there will be a new episode of Real Housewives of Orange County out. So we're recapping the most recent episode up until this recording. And then for people listening, I will be covering the newest episode as well. So stay tuned for that. So we're going to talk about OC. We're also going to talk about Surreal Life Villa of Secrets, which in my opinion, Lyndsay, we've been chatting about this so much. I don't understand how people are not watching the show.
I think because it's a little hard to access. That is, if it would be on Bravo, I think more people would be talking about it. But y'all are sleeping on this show.
For real.
I think Macy Gray is an icon. We'll get into it. But it is just good. And maybe me and you both like it because there's really a lot of elements where they're really talking about their feelings and their thoughts. And these are people who I guess people will look at them and say they're the C-listers or D-listers of Hollywood, but they've all had big careers and also have been through it. And so, I don't know, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what you're saying is that we get to know some of these people that we think are douches, i.e. Chet Hanks, and then you find out he's a lovely human being. And I feel so bad. A literal angel, a literal earth angel. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that I thought Chet Hanks was a douche because he is actually a lovely human being. And I never thought I'd hear myself say that. So
no, not at all.
Me neither. Right. So we're going to talk all about the cast. And, it's interesting because it's also the first reality show, I think, that's had a virtual host. I don't know that that's ever, or maybe it was done on a Surreal Life before. I can't remember, but
yeah, I know Big Brother right now is doing a virtual, I don't say host, almost just a virtual person component, but then they also have a real host. But yeah, so and this is the first time seeing this as well, like the way that they're doing it.
Yeah, and it's odd because I'm not the hugest fan of artificial intelligence. I think it's a really slippery slope, but I'm like, well, it's great, so I can't even be mad at it.
Yeah, she's like a comedic element of the show.
Sincerely. And I'm like, does AI really have that good of a sense of humor? Is someone writing? I don't know. I just have a million questions about that.
Same.
Okay. So maybe we'll figure them out. Maybe we won't. But so let's get into OC. So in this episode of OC, this is where we see the dueling girls trips, right? We see Gina, Shannon, Heather, and Emily at La Quinta, which, I don't live in LA, And I always hear about La Quinta, La Quinta, La Quinta, La Quinta. And how I guess that's where, isn't that where Lala got a house?
So she
Am I
got
wrong about that?
her and Sheena got a house in, Sherman Oaks, which is in the valley.
But then didn't Lala also get like another like a beach house? Okay,
that's in
I'm
Palm
confused.
Springs.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So La Quinta gets stuck in my head because I feel like maybe Kyle talked about La Quinta. Does Kyle Richards, is that where her house is in La Quinta? Maybe I'm just completely off
Yeah,
base.
I can't remember.
Well, either way, I'm sorry for all the confusion. But so Gina, Shannon, Heather, and Emily are there, which is hilarious because the house that they're at is Elizabeth Vargas's home. Now, Lyndsay, did you recognize Elizabeth Vargas immediately? Because I surely didn't.
No, not at all.
Okay. I was like, and here's the thing about me, right? My brain, I have an encyclopedia of pop culture nonsense in my brain, right? If only my brain could be filled with other better stuff. But and the reason I'm sharing this is because for me to not recognize this woman, she just didn't register with me at all. But she was once a housewife of Orange County. She was a one and done housewife in season 15, which was 2020. And I think none of us remember because we were all traumatized.
Well,
I think everyone was traumatized.
That's the truth. I didn't see season 15 of Orange County, but when I started getting to OC, I was because I know Sheena's podcast, they talked a lot about, I think Gretchen was a housewife on there. So I started looking at all the older housewives that, the one and dones or have been a couple of seasons. I need to go back because I didn't realize, no, wait, pause. I'm getting Orange County and Atlanta mixed up. I didn't realize that Eva from America's Next Top Model was on Atlanta. And I'm so upset that I've missed this era and that she's not on there anymore. I'm sorry. I'm America's Next Top Model girly. So side tangent on that, but it's not even OC. I got my housewives mixed up. Anyway.
Yeah.
I did not realize that she was on season 15, Elizabeth.
Yes. But that's so funny because I love all reality shows too. And, that is so funny that you didn't know that about Eva. But listen, our brains do funny things. And,
yes.
And so going back to Elizabeth Vargas, I was like, her face, I never forget a face. But so she was on the episodes where Bronwyn was a housewife and Kelly Dodd were housewives. And so after season 15, Elizabeth, Kelly, and Bronwyn were all fired. And that's why we don't remember her. That and trauma. And I think that Elizabeth Vargas, we didn't really, between Kelly Dodd and Bronwyn's antics, I think she just probably fell really flat because those are two very polarizing, extreme personalities. And I can't believe now we're getting another Bronwyn on Salt Lake City. Did you see that?
I did see that, yes.
I was like, I've never met anyone named Bronwyn or seen that name ever in my life until reality TV.
Never heard that name at all.
Which I'm not mad at the name. I don't like Bronwyn, who was on OC. I really have issues with her parenting, mothering and things like that. I have reactions to that. Let me just say that. But so Elizabeth is like, hey, clearly it felt like to me like Selling Sunset meets or Buying Beverly Hills, meets Real Housewives. It was like, let's show Gina's like bazillion-dollar house it just felt very commercially to me. Did you feel that same?
No, it didn't. I was confused. So I was like, okay, so Gina is she helping list the house, but they're going there to party at a house that you're trying to sell?
And that you've already staged. And as we can see, it got very dirty, which it's so funny because the two people who dropped stuff were both the people who, everyone was mad at Gina. But I felt like I couldn't help but wonder if it was a little bit passive aggressive, that Heather dropped the cocktail and then Emily dropped the cocktail and poor Gina. I thought she was going to have an aneurysm.
No, I think it was a little F you to Gina on their part.
I kind of do too. I mean, Heather's digs are less subtle. I think Emily's are more outright. Heather's are very passive aggressive. Yeah, but we can talk about that. So, and also I love, though, can I say too, Gina's ability to roast herself. So not only did she roast herself about this decision to take them to La Quinta, she was like, I'm so stupid. Who think, she was so cute. She also roasted her own interview look. Did you see that?
I did on Instagram, which watching her interview look, I'm like, oh girl, you look like you were supposed to be on the Jetsons or something. Like it just,
yeah.
She looked adorable. Like here's the thing, she still looks adorable, but just, I think the hair and the dress and her video was so funny. She was like, I get it. Okay.
Right.
I get it. I love when they can laugh at themselves like that.
I respect somebody so much when they can just be like, yeah, okay, it wasn't my best look. So what? Let's move on. I just appreciated that acknowledgement, number one. But number two, I agree. I think she looked adorable. And it's like, sometimes you never know how something is going to, it may look a certain way on, or you may feel a certain way. And then on film or on tape, it's different. But like, listen, I think that's all part of exploring. And I'm going to be honest, I really have a hard time when people are mean about people's looks. I just, I'm such not a subscriber of that. And, I get it. I think she did set herself up because it did look a little wacky, for a minute. But I think Gina's beautiful and I just adore her. I adore Gina.
Yeah, I think there's a line of being cheeky and fun with it. You know what I mean? And I think she established that as well with it. But I know sometimes people can, obviously, we see this a lot with Bravo right now, take things too far. But I'm glad she was able to find the humor with it. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. A good sense of humor, I think, is just the best accessory. Who cares about your hair or your dress? If you got a good sense of humor and a good head on your shoulders, you are good to go.
There you go.
So Shannon stirs the pot and here's my interpretation of this. So when Shannon is telling Emily about what Gina has said about her, this whole storyline was very confusing for me to follow. So I think I figured it out and we're going to break it down. But so Shannon basically stirs the pot, telling Emily that Gina's said that she's mean and aggressive. And, Emily and Gina have a real close friendship. So I could tell that Emily was hurt, but my gosh, when she was hurt, I was like, ooh, icy. She has a very powerful energy when she's hurt.
Oh, yeah. And Gina kept asking her, like, girl, you're not okay. Just tell me. Emily was very much, which I get sometimes I can be like that when I like shut down and it's not healthy, but you're just like, I'm fine. But she was not fine.
Right. I get this. It's just like when you say you're fine, it's like, I don't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with this right now. So I'm just going to say that I'm fine, even though we can all tell that I'm not. So I find that Shannon dropping that with Emily felt to me like she was like told to do her job. And she was just like, I don't want to do this right now. Did you get that same feeling?
Yeah, I 100% think she was told, you need to bring this up, because she didn't look comfortable telling it up, telling it. And also, Gina didn't get mad at Shannon for bringing it up. That wasn't, you know what I mean? Because that usually happens, why did you even bring this up? Gina wasn't even upset about that. So I think they kind of knew all in that moment, like, we have to talk about it. And they do, right? It's literally, they're on their own separate trip, and there is tension between Heather and Gina, and now she's saying stuff about Emily, so it does all need to be addressed. I don't think Shannon wanted to do it that way, but I'm sure she was highly encouraged to do it that way.
I would imagine, and that's definitely the face that she gave. She's like, well, production just told me I had to drop this bomb, so here I go, because this is my job. But yeah, so the Heather, Gina, Katie drama triangle. I've been talking a lot about drama triangles lately, and OC has the best example of drama triangles that I've ever seen. Like, there couldn't be a better example of it, even in my grad school. Like, this is the example of the drama triangles, right?
Yep.
But here's why I was confused. So I thought Gina was trying to be a loyal friend to Heather. And then she told Katie not to say anything, or why did you bring this up? And so I was like, I'm so confused as to why this is a problem. However, what I feel like I have figured out, and I want to hear what you think about this, Lyndsay, is that I think the timeline was their issue. So Gina claims that she called Katie like 10 minutes after Katie dropped the bomb. And by the way, this is the dumbest storyline. Who cares if they called paparazzi? Who gives a shit? Can I be honest? Who cares?
Yeah. It is light, petty drama that I find it's very funny to me. But here's the thing, and I am really enjoying Katie. I think her family story is really interesting. However, I don't want her to get in the trap of esophogate. So if we keep talking about this every episode, and to be fair, it does seem like a lot of other people, like Tamara brought it up at dinner, right? So other people are bringing it up. So I think Katie is going to have to navigate how to get out of that, because, you know what I mean? The first episode, you know, funny, haha. Now we're getting into it like, okay, it's, you know what I mean? Like, Heather's never going to admit, you know what I mean? Like, if she did, she's never going to admit that she did, right? So where I get confused is Gina saying, because I know before they started filming, right, there was some kind of like Christmas party and things like that. Is Gina saying this phone call took place during filming? So when she first brought it up to the girls about the paparazzi and the person that said yes to it, is she saying she brought that up and then Gina called her right after that conversation? Is that what they're saying?
That's a good point. That's what I'm confused about, is the timeline of this. Because
or was it before filming?
I think it was before filming.
Oh.
That is, and listen, people listening, they are, you know, boots on the ground, eagle eye people. So if you have an answer to this, let us know, because we are both confused. But I think from what I understand, the timeline was the issue. Whether I think before filming, it sounds like Heather is mad that Gina didn't try to shut it down before filming.
Okay.
That's my best guess. But I feel that whenever we have a situation like this where we all as an audience are very confused, there's missing pieces to the puzzle. So this is the best we can come up with based on, you know, what we watched and things like that. So, you know, it was interesting to watch Emily be frustrated with Gina, and then Heather just kind of takes over.
Emily was like, oh, I guess I'm done.
I guess we're done with this beef. Okay. And it was actually kind of hilarious. And that's what I love about Emily. It seemed like she almost wasn't even mad anymore. She's like, go ahead, Heather. You know, it's all about you, right?
Literally.
Yeah, literally. And the one thing before we move on to the other girls' trip, there's a lot to talk about there, is that I did appreciate that Gina did call out in one of the interviews about how Heather equating what Shannon said about Gina's children with CPS and this whole paparazzi thing, her equating them is insane. It's insanity.
It is. I don't really like when, you know, people start to compare situations. I understand that, you know, Heather, I'm sure, especially with what they do, I'm sure lots of conversations have to happen with their kids. However, these are completely different. Completely different.
So different, in fact, that I don't even think they should be compared. And
No.
I do agree with Gina that, you know, being a friend to Heather, I think means probably swallowing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that, Gina's the type of person that she can swallow so much, but when it comes to like the real meat of the matter, she's like, no, we're not going to just brush past this. I don't care if you're friends or not. Because Gina does have this mentality of like, to be friends with someone, you have to be real with them. That's the only way of real friendships. And so, but that's the difference between Heather and Emily. Emily can have a real friendship. I don't think Heather can. I think Heather wants to be the queen bee and the rich, and good for her. But, Mazel, you're so rich, woman. But that doesn't mean that you're never wrong or that, you can compare the situations. They're not comparable. But so let's go over to the other girls' trip, Tamara, Alexis, Jen, and Katie at Big Bear. And I think what you said about Katie before, Lyndsay, was so wise, because I do agree that I want to know more about Katie's history. That's so rich, good stuff. She is an Asian woman adopted by a white family in Orange County. There was no talk of culture. There was no... and I think, her telling the story, so many people, I'm sure, who've been adopted can relate to that in terms of if they were adopted by a family, of a different race. And I love that Jen talked to her about that.
Yeah.
And the one thing I love about Jen, for all of her flaws or whatever, is she really does try to do the best she can for her kids, especially when it comes to having her son know his cultural identity, which is so special and important.
Yeah. And I love that Katie talked about how she thinks her parents thought that they were actually doing the right thing at that time. Right. And I think a lot of adoptive parents, think that way. Mm-hmm. And I think now there's a conversation of, people who are adopted and are talking about, especially if they're adopted outside of their race or ethnicity, they're talking about how they really, lacked their culture, or their parents didn't bring them up or immerse them in their culture. And right. Katie is wanting to do that with her kids. And I don't know, I think there is so much more to Katie than this paparazzi thing. So again, I hope we don't get stuck here, because I actually really do like Katie and I want to know more about her.
I agree. And I do want to just reiterate what you just said that's so important, is that it wasn't done with malicious intent. I think that the adoption process has a lot of challenges for all people involved. And so there's some grace that needs to be given. However, I also want to say, growing up in the 80s, I feel that we were just all feral cats, and it was like, don't talk about stuff. Like in the 80s, people just thought about, well, if we don't mention it, it should be fine. And the world is just different now. Thankfully, the world is different in that we know now we got to talk about it. Not talking about it is what creates the trauma. And so I appreciated that she gave her parents that grace to say, they probably didn't know any better, but now she's being a cycle breaker and doing it differently.
Yeah.
And especially, here's the thing, when she talked about Asian flush, I laughed so hard because one of my closest friends is Asian. Mm-hmm. And she was like, clearly they don't have Asian friends. And I was like, clearly, how have you never heard of that before? It's like a physiological thing that happens, And so Katie explained it extremely well. So I do agree. I hope we can move forward from this dumb paparazzi thing and hear more about her very rich life.
Yes.
So I think before we move on, we definitely have to talk about just the montage of Alexis just chattering on like a lovesick, emotionally stunted teenager. It's painful to watch for me. How do you feel about it?
I cannot stand it. It physically, emotionally makes me uncomfortable. And it's really hard for me to find anything I like about Alexis. The only thing that I try to tell myself is like, okay, she truly is in it deep with Johnny J. I think I'm just going to say, I don't like the man. I
What's to like?
Right. He seems just your very classic. They're in that honeymoon period, the love bombing. And I know those terms can be thrown out a lot, but because of his history and like truly what we're seeing, I think, and the way that he defends him no matter what. And here's the thing. I love my husband. I would defend him, but also I love him so much that I could see where, you know what I mean, if he was saying something or doing something to not defend. And I think that's healthy. What she's doing is not healthy.
Correct. I love my husband dearly. We've been together for 22 years. This September, we'll be married for 15. Okay. And here's what I'll say. When he's wrong, I got to tell him that he's wrong. And when I'm wrong, he needs to tell me that I'm wrong, because that's the only way real relationships survive. So I fully agree with you about that. And here's my frustration with the whole thing is that, and I posted about this on Instagram, number one, so threatening to release videos is just despicable. Now,
disgusting.
I will amend what I said before. I said that he recorded them, but it was like ring footage. So it was
correct.
He didn't record it with a phone, right? But it was caught through the, the ring camera. So I just want to be clear about that.
But he still has it.
Correct. So he still has it, holding it against her. And the most despicable thing to me that people really resonated with is that before Shannon left and crashed, if she was in such bad shape, for John to not get any sort of aid, any sort of help to say, okay, listen, she's out of order right now. I don't want to be around her, but call a friend, call somebody who loves her to say, come get your girl. And I feel he really is setting her up. I have very serious concerns about John Jansen. But what I don't understand about Alexis is that if this is what he is doing to his ex, what on earth do you think he's going to do to you when he's unhappy with you, when you two are no longer in favor? Am I right?
No, you're totally right. And I think Emily even hinted at something like that last episode, the episode before this. But Alexis is not going to see that because in her mind, they're already married. They're already getting married. So it's never going to be her. And I think it is such a red flag if you're dating someone, the way that they talk about previous people that they've dated. And here, we can all like have a past and have dated people who have been toxic. Like I know, I've been there.
Oh, girl, me too. I dated narcissists for
same.
a long time.
Cheaters, like, you know what I mean? However,
yeah.
I'm not constantly bringing up those people to my husband now. And I'm not constantly calling John. I'm sorry, but the way that she's talking so much about how Shannon's talking about him. I'm sorry. It's because he keeps talking about her and he's suing her. And so, he is only suing her, in my opinion, that because he just wants her to know, like, hey, I'm still here and I still have power, because otherwise he would have signed. The whole thing with the lawsuit is there was some sort of agreement, like a non-disclosure where they wouldn't talk about each other. And he said, no, I don't want to do that.
Right. So here's what this tells you. That behavior tells me it's not about the money.
No,
the
not at all.
intent is to humiliate and completely bring Shannon down, which is such a gross personality characteristic. And also, does anybody remember when Alexis was married to Jim Bellino and it was the same thing? It was like, she was like a lovesick teenager, stood up for him, went to bat for her man, and then all of a sudden they get divorced and he's Satan in a smock. So Alexis is what's the word I'm looking for? She's lost credibility, in my opinion, because that is something that like teenagers do when you get into new relationships, like that level of kind of obsession and enmeshment and codependence is something that usually happens with teenagers. And so I think that unfortunately, Alexis to me has not evolved at all. Oh. And that's sad to see because I think she has an interesting story. Alexis has a trans child. I'd love to hear more about that. I'd love to hear more about some of her interesting, things going on in her life. I do think it's going the way of esophogate of, but Alexis is she's part of her own problem. So, I have an understanding of how sometimes editing can go, but also like she's doing it to herself.
And how do you feel, Alexis? You're truly there only this season to terrorize Shannon. That is the only reason why they want you. You can say all you want, like you were in talks before you even started dating John. Like, I don't believe that. You were truly brought on this season to terrorize Shannon. And the way that you and Tamara are acting like you're besties now, I can't. I cannot.
Because for people who haven't watched since day one, I've watched since day one, episode 1, and Tamara and, oh my gosh, there's so many names floating around my head. Tamara and Alexis, they hated each other with such a fiery passion. So for me, this
Jesus jugs. I mean, what?
No, feels very disingenuous. Right. For those who don't know, Tamara gave her that moniker. I joked about it on my last podcast because normally I think that's mean, but it is really hilarious too. So it's like, come on, this is for the show. This is ridiculous. But so let me ask you, what girls trip would you have chosen?
I would have picked Gina and them. I cannot. I would not be able to be in the same room as Alexis. And honestly, I couldn't even be in the same room as Tamara. I really don't like how she's talking to Shannon. And it's interesting going into this season. I don't know why I thought this. I don't know if it's because the trailer, but I remember going to the season thinking, oh man, I'm not sure how to feel. I wasn't thinking Shannon was going to take like accountability for her actions, but I feel like she is. And the way that Tamara keeps bringing up, calling her an alcoholic, keeps bringing it up. And I understand, like, look, what Shannon did, DUI driving, is horrific and someone could have gotten killed. And but here's the thing. I think Shannon has acknowledged that and if you're friends with someone, like Tamara's whole thing is, you're still drinking. And I could sit here and say, yeah, I don't think Shannon should drink, right? I don't, right. But it sounds to me from listening to her on podcasts is like, Shannon sounds like she's still in therapy. And it sounds to me that her therapist is working from like a harm reduction approach. And I think that's important to talk about because harm reduction makes people uncomfortable because it's like, well, aren't you condoning them, to still drink or do drugs? It's like, no, because people are going to do what they're going to do. And Shannon is in the state of mind where she still wants to drink, right?
Right.
With, Shannon is still in the state, she's like, no, like I can have 2 drinks. And she said something on a podcast where she's like, if you're worried about me, check in with me, or I check in with myself. So I'm almost like, oh, I wonder if she does like body scans with her. Like just the language that she uses. I feel like she's very, her and her therapist are coming from that approach. And I really don't like how Tamara's talking to her.
Yeah. And so before we move on to Surreal Life, you brought up something super important. As a former addictions therapist, I want to explain to people listening, harm reduction is where people who struggle with addiction are not ready. They're not, for whatever reason, they're not ready. They're not motivated. They do not want to stop what it is that they're doing. And so harm reduction is a method that says, okay, I'm going to meet you where you're at. There are some programs that say if you continue to drink, to use whatever, you're done here. But harm reduction says, I'm going to meet you where you're at. I'm going to understand that motivation is a long, very arduous process, and it's not linear. It's cyclical and it's hard. So there are methods that therapists will use to try to plant seeds when maybe the client isn't completely ready. And the point is that Shannon has to realize on her own what her truth is.
Yeah.
Tamara yelling it, like chasing her, with a torch through town square, screaming that she's an alcoholic is not going to help her figure it out any faster. And in fact, it's probably going to have the opposite. But Tamara claims, that when she loves people, she goes hard. And I just, I've never been a fan of that logic or thinking.
No.
Because, there's a saying, don't lecture somebody when they need a hug. And so I understand, a recovery and addiction is so nuanced. It's so individualized. I always say this. The only person fit to judge that is Shannon and her healthcare provider, therapist, practitioner, whatever you want to call it, right? Those are the only two people that know. Tamara has her feelings. She clearly has her opinions, but we can't bully people into recovery. So using a harm reduction method, meeting people where they're at, allows people to thrive in ways that they wouldn't if they were being given hard lines. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And listen, I feel like we could talk about this for a million years, but we have to move on to Surreal Life. And I do want to say, obviously, my vote would be for La Quinta as well. I would never in 1 bazillion years have gone to the Big Bear girl. Like, I can't. I couldn't with Alexis. I could not. I would have a really, really hard time with that. But before we talk about Surreal Life, ya girl, ya bish has her first live read. Ooh, ooh. So please let me do my live read first, and then we'll talk about Surreal Life. So I have become a brand ambassador for I Am Human. And I Am Human is more than a clothing brand. It's a movement and a reminder that no matter who you are, where you come from, or what you believe in, we are all human. And that's something worth celebrating every single day. I Am Human's unisex lounge and athleisure wear is designed to celebrate who you are, not define you, whether you're at home, in the gym, at therapy, check, or out in the world. Our pieces are made with comfort, style, and inclusivity at the forefront. Crafted from sustainable materials, I Am Human brand clothing reflects their commitment to a better, more inclusive world. And with every purchase, you're not just getting clothing that meets the highest safety standards for mental health residential programs, which I love. You're really making a difference. You're supporting mental health charities that empower people to embrace their challenges that make them human. So please join the movement and visit IamHumanTheBrand.com, because no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you believe in, we are all human. And for my listeners, you can use code BISH20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase. So the code again is BISH20, BISH 20 for 20% off. And I will say, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this because we have to move on, but I will say that I talked to the person who, it's a small business. They're really new starting out. I love everything about this brand. The humanity behind it, how it goes to help provide money for mental health resources, et cetera, et cetera. It is sincerely the best sweatshirt I've ever owned in my life. It's the softest. It's the most well-made. I will be buying more just to support them. So yay. There we have it. And I'll be talking more about I Am Human as a brand ambassador, and I'll be posting some pictures with, my gear and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that. Okay, now let's get into Surreal Life. Villa of Secrets, which you and we agree that it's hard for people to access. So you can see it on MTV, but I guess if you don't have cable, there are other ways to stream it, but it's on streamers that I've never heard of.
Yeah, and it's confusing because they act like it's on, because I have Paramount Plus, and they act like it's on Paramount Plus, but it's not yet. So Surreal Life is confusing because it's been a show that started in like the early 2000s. I remember Flavor of Love on it with Bridget and then Jose Canseco. He was on season 5. I remember that season. And then it was I think it wasn't on for a little bit. But I think there was a season last year. So season 1, they call that season 1 is on, but this season isn't.
I also recommend people to Google that because there's a couple other ways to watch, but that's so interesting. You said, I didn't realize it keeps advertising that they're on Paramount Plus, but they're actually not. Okay. Because that is the confusing thing about Surreal Life. There were old iterations of it, and then it took a hiatus, and then it came back last year or 2 years ago. And then this is it is very confusing. But so Surreal Life Villa Secrets is 2 weeks in Medellin. Is that how you say it? Medellin, Colombia?
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, an idiot about saying that. So, and as we mentioned, they have the first virtual host, and her name is Sloan Surreal, which stands for Surreal Life Operator and Navigator. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cute.
That is cute.
So the cast is Chet Hanks, who is he's actually so talented. Who would have known? Chet Hanks is so talented. He's a singer. He really has a good voice. He's a rapper, musician, actor, but obviously known for being Tom Hanks' son, which I say that last because I do have a lot of empathy hearing how annoying that is to him. It's like he wants to have his own identity, and I can only imagine having Tom Hanks as your dad has got to overshadow all of it. So there's Chet Hanks, and then Kim Zolciak-Biermann, which holy moly, the Kim and Croy drama.
Oh my gosh. It's so crazy because a lot of the episodes, they're talking on the phone. So I didn't realize this, and I don't remember this about past seasons. Well, to be fair, phone usage was a lot different in the early 2000s, but I didn't realize they still had their phones. So they still have their phones. They still have access to people. So that's what's interesting, because I remember when they were filming, it came out like, oh, Kim and Chet might be hooking up. And I was like, how did that? Someone must have leaked that, but they have their phones the entire time they're in there.
Right. And so that's the thing. I didn't realize that either. But what I notice is that Kim is legitimately sucked in and attached to the phone and the drama and the chaos that comes with it. Yeah. Because everyone else, I don't even know that I've seen anyone with their phone, but every scene that's being filmed, Kim is like on her phone. She's like shriveled up like a little shrimp. Her back, I'm like, posture, girl, posture. She looks frail. She looks like she does not look well. And I'm not a commenter on looks usually, but she just does not look well.
No. And Johnny does a really funny impression of her like, this is Kim on her phone. Like, someone will be telling her the most traumatic thing, and she's just like, click, click, click on her phone. Then she's like, yeah, Sir Croy said.
Lyndsay, Johnny Weir is giving me life, honey.
Oh.
Giving me
I
life.
love him. Yes.
Love. Listen, so Johnny Weir, for those of you who don't know, he is an Olympic ice skater, but he is so famous for being in the Olympics, but he never won a medal. Mm-mm. And I think he's just famous because he's just a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
He just seems so funny and so grounded and has his head on his shoulders. And I just love everything about him.
I do too. And there's one episode where he really opens up about just his place in life and how he's felt, there are times where with, the community, people see him as, his words, too gay but then also not gay enough. And so that's the thing about Surreal Life is we have these little moments with these cast members. They do these silly like challenges. That part I'm just like, okay, this is silly. But my favorite part is when they're just in the house and they just start chatting, because this is like when we get those real moments. And that's, like I said, the show is good, y'all. I promise.
I swear, and I fully agree. There are these little nuggets of gold that are dropped in this show casually. Yeah, in between the silly, challenges and whatnot. So I'll go through the rest of the cast. So Macy Gray, as you mentioned, musician legend. If you don't know who Macy Gray is, bro, I don't even know what you've been doing. There's also Tyler Posey, who is a musician and was a child actor. Most famously, he played J-Lo's son in Made in Manhattan, which was a real long time ago.
And Teen Wolf.
And thank you. Yes, that's right. He was in a couple of things. That was the most notable one I wrote down. But a file under the most surprising thing on the planet, rapper O.T. Genesis. So he's a rapper, and Malika, do you say her last name Hawk or Hack?
I'm not sure.
So Malika is friends with the Kardashians, and she was kind of famous for that. So they have a child together, and he talks about how their son is autistic. And how he, growing up in some really unsafe, really traumatizing scenarios, he's trying to be the best dad he can be and get his son the most resources. And he just seems like, I'm like, I love you.
Oh, y'all, when he talks about his growing up experience, like he talks a lot like gang violence, like he has seen some things. And he's like a big teddy bear. The way that he talks to people, and just you learn a lot about him. And I loved him talking about his son, because I think he had a real moment where he was like, I told myself that no, like my child doesn't have autism. Like he's, he's quote unquote fine. But the thing with that is I understand parents having that moment, but then once they actually learn more about what autism is, right? And, you learn more about your kids, their needs may look a little different, but like he said, his kid is like the smartest. I forget what thing he said. So I loved, because you saw a parent that I sometimes think parents don't get past that, and they get in denial about what their kids' needs are, and they look at it in such a negative way when it doesn't have to be. And I'm like, truly, he's a teddy bear. A teddy bear was so much trauma, but like you would not like think of it, because just the way he lights up a room. He really does.
He really does. And the interesting thing is, I want to fix him. That's my instinct, because he is like a little kid in the body of an adult. Like you said, he grew up with a ton of gang violence, witnessing, shootings and people that he loved being murdered in front of his eyes, and just like really, poverty and just all of this stuff. And so when I see someone like that, I just think he has so much potential. He has such a good heart. And you can tell he hasn't really worked on that, because there's this toxic masculinity piece that comes in with these neighborhoods, right? Like you have to be like a guy. You have to be like, super masculine. And that turns into toxic masculinity, where it's like, well, we can't cry. We can't accept people with different needs or whatever. And so I love that his love of his son helps him grow and understand that when children have more developmental needs than we anticipate, okay, that's all right. Yeah. They are still beautiful, wonderful children. And so I just appreciated the advocacy. I appreciated hearing from him on that. And I want to help him get to the other side of that trauma, but it's none of my business. So I'm like, Melissa, I almost reached out to him, and then I was like, girl, stop.
Like, whoa,
stop it.
The one thing I did appreciate with him, and I won't like go into too much, but there was an episode where him and Macy kind of got in a little bit, and it's interesting because at first he was just like, okay, I'm sorry, and I was like, oh wow, like that, he just, he said, I'm sorry, he didn't make excuses. But then reflecting back, he kind of was like, well, no, wait a minute, this kind of also hurts me too. So like, I feel like they were able to like come together and talk about it. And so I think, I don't know, I actually think like this is a silly show, but I think this is like a good experience for him.
I think for each of these individuals, especially for Kim, being in this space has been truly healing for all of them. And I feel like one of the most interesting things that I notice as a therapist is that these reality shows, when they only film for a short amount of time, they use a lot of psychological manipulation to get people to feel more bonded than they are. Yeah. And that's all I kept thinking about too when I was watching this. It's like they're doing all these challenges like ice baths and sound baths and all these amazing things, retreats and all this dancing and somatic exercises and all this stuff. And it's creating this sense of family that each of them are so desperately looking for. I think with the exception of I think Tyler has some good relationships and Johnny has some good relationships, but a lot of them are kind of all in that same boat.
Yeah.
But also let me mention, so before I get off track too much, Allie Brooke, she's a singer from the girl group Fifth Harmony, which I used to really enjoy them back in the day. And then there's Josie Canseco, who is the model and daughter of Jose Canseco, who she also has a super interesting story.
Yeah, she does.
That we just heard last night. But so basically what they do for people listening who have not been able to watch, each episode, there's like a synopsis and there's, they'll do like a group challenge and then they'll have downtime. And so for me, I find so much, like you said, there's so many nuggets of stuff in all of that. There's no bad parts of this show. So the thing, I want to give like a brief synopsis. So I love that Kim sauntered into the villa, red Solo cup in hand, and had a literal wine suitcase in tow. I am not, like, no joke. Literal suitcase just for wine. And I'm like, no wonder she has money troubles. Who needs a suitcase just for wine? And what a waste of space also. It was a whole huge suitcase with like foam things inside. And it's like, do you think you're not going to get alcohol there? I'm so confused.
I know. There was no reason for that.
No reason for it. But so basically, the major takeaways for me is that regarding Kim and Kroy is that they are both a humongous part of the problem and the toxicity, both of them. At first, I heard Kroy's side of the story. Kroy's side of the story that he's been telling on social media is that she's a gambling addict, allegedly, and that she's spent all their money and, you know, their house has been in foreclosure and they're having all these struggles. And so what Kim claims is that Kroy was mad that she went to film, which I get it. Your family's falling apart and you're in Medellin, Colombia, flirting with Chet Hanks. Yeah, that's not a good look for Kim. You know, it's like
and they had sex 2 days before she came into film. Like their relationship is so
it's so
all over
toxic.
The place.
And so what Lyndsay is referencing is, for those who didn't see it, Kim said that Kroy filed all these motions, but then they slept together 2 days before she left for the trip. And so that's how I know that they're both, to me, I'm watching people who are basically addicted to each other. There's this addictive, codependent process that's happening between the two of them, and it's so sick. It's like they can't let each other go, but they don't want each other to be happy. And you can see how that is impacting Kim because she looks frail. I mean, I have real concerns for her.
Yeah, she does. And it was sad too because I think it was in episode 5 I have written down. That was the episode where she found out that he filed another motion, I think for full custody. And I thought that was really shitty because obviously she was away and they do get paid for this. So this was, you know, technically a work trip. And so for him to do that, and it wasn't, I don't think it was even so much like he had concern for the kids. I think it was more so despite her. And I think
to punish her.
Yeah. And that's really gross because since they do have, I don't know how old their kids are. Do you? They're young, right?
There's so many and they're a billion. I have no idea. There's
because Brielle we see her, but she's from a different, that's her first kid from a different relationship, right?
Right.
And then she has, is it two younger ones?
Oh, no, she's like 4.
Oh, she has 4. Are they 4?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just remember that really sad video of, I think it was, that I think it was the boy,
Cash got bit by the dog.
No, wasn't there a video recently, like, of them? Because, you know, during this time, like 911 calls were like being released and things like that. There was something with the kids and I can't remember. I just remember seeing a video and I was like, oh, this is like heartbreaking. Like this is too much.
Well, it's interesting because what Kim opened up about on the Surreal Life is this point. She claims that her parents were the ones who leaked to the press that her oldest 2 daughters, so Brielle is her oldest, and what is Ariana is the okay, so they have 2 different fathers. And I guess they didn't want that to be public. And so Kim said that she basically broke off communication with her family when they did that because that's egregious, right? I mean, and family is family, regardless of blood or, you know, whatever. So I understand what she's saying. And I do think her parents are toxic too, but she also has made up 1,000 excuses why she doesn't talk to her parents. And like, she just can never take accountability for her role in anything. Because, so the one thing we see on Surreal Life is that the only place that there aren't cameras is in the bathrooms.
Yes.
And they make a point of saying that because then there was one night, I think it was episode 5, where the Chet and Kim, their flirtation boils over and they're like in the bathroom and they keep Johnny awake because, you know, Johnny and Kim are roommates and they're so loud doing, I don't know what. I can only speculate. But then Kim says, and I wrote it down somewhere, she's talking to Croy and she says, to date, I've done nothing wrong. And I'm like, girl, we literally just watched you do something that your husband would not be a fan of.
Yeah. And even if they didn't do anything, she wanted Croy to think that something happened because that's why, you know what I mean? It was leaked that something happened between Chet and Kim. And like you said, we don't see anything. They literally are talking, giggling in the bathroom till like 5 a.m. Could it be edited in a way to where, you know what I mean, it looks more flirtatious or things? Sure. But even if something did or didn't happen, Kim wanted Croy to think something happened. And that's where her toxic side, you know what I mean, like comes out.
Correct. Because Johnny even says, and I have this highlighted here, you know, Johnny to me is like I look to him to say what's really going on in this situation. He seems like a reasonable human. And Johnny says she's trying to poke the bear being her ex-husband. And he's right. Yeah. She's participating in this sick thing. And Kim's admitted flirting with Chet is fun. It's an easy distraction from home. I'm trying to avoid reality at home by living in La La Land. And so what's interesting and what I want to say about this is that you can't change your behavior if you're in denial about the behaviors that you're having. Number one.
Right.
Number 2, you have to be ready to change, which she's not. And number 3, I do want to say that what I've seen of her on the Surreal Life, it does give to me as an addictions therapist, it does give credence to what Croy's saying because avoidance is the same thing that fuels it fuels addiction, right? When we have a certain level of pain and we exceed our threshold to feel that pain, we reach out to lots of different unhealthy coping mechanisms. And one of them is gambling, drinking, gambling, substance uses, unhealthy relationships, right? So I think Kim is using all of this to distract her from the fact that the call's coming from inside the house. Like she needs to get her life right. And Kim seems to me like the type of person who wants to be more healed than she is. Mm-hmm. And she relies on sage and this and that. And it's like, no, there's sage and crystals ain't going to help you. You got to get to the root of what is going on. Otherwise, these unhealthy relational patterns are just going to repeat over and over. And she's just not ready. Speaking of harm reduction, right? She's not ready to do that. She's not ready to make the change.
No, she's not even in the what is the stages? The contemplate. She's not even there. The contemplation. Yeah, she is not even thinking about it at all. And it's sad because they do have young kids involved, and you can just tell on the show the way that her and Corey are talking so much on the phone. They really shouldn't be talking right now. Like they really should only be communicating, I think, with a mediator or a third party, because there's one episode where you hear him screaming on the phone, and then you hear her, then she's, yelling at him back. And it's really uncomfortable to see, because I also think a part of them, still talking to each other is neither of them both still want to let go of each other. And I think we got to a point, because they're not officially divorced yet, right?
Not from what I understand. And so whenever this was filmed, she claims I'm going home and getting a divorce. And then surprise, surprise, she goes home and they probably slept together, allegedly. But clearly they are not able to let go of each other. And what's so sad is, like you said, the kids are the ones that suffer. So I hope they're able to figure that out. But one thing I did want to say that frustrated me, Macy Gray, first of all, I love her. I think that she's wonderful, so talented, icon for sure. But In episode 3, she had a medical emergency, which the synopsis said it was a mystery illness. It wasn't a mystery illness. So what happened was Macy said that she went on Ozempic prior, like right before they filmed, because she, quote, didn't want to be fat on TV. As a woman, my body has been chewed up and spit out medically. I have scars from top to tail, very, very, big, it's been a lot. And I just want to say that it's so important for us as women to celebrate our bodies and honor our bodies for everything they've helped us get through, rather than tearing ourselves down. To hear a legend like Macy Gray say she didn't want to be fat on TV, I wanted to shake her.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. And then she ends up having to go to the emergency room because Ozempic, here's the thing, it has a black box warning, which is a very scary warning that it can cause pancreatic failure, which if your pancreas dies, you die. You only have one pancreas and you can't remove it. It's not one of those organs.
Right.
Number one. And number two, Macy, she stopped eating. She wasn't passing, she wasn't having bowel movements. She wasn't eating. And she was just like sick from the Ozempic. And I don't know. What do you think about that? It bummed me out.
It bummed me out too. The one thing I will give Macy is that she was honest. And I think that is a thing we are seeing in Hollywood, is a lot of people in Hollywood are just seeing Ozempic as a quick fix, right? Get skinny. And that's not what it's for. I have a friend who has started Ozempic and it truly has helped him so much. There's like medical things going and it truly has helped him. But the way that she presented it, I give her credit as far as saying, look, I did do this because I was going to go on tour soon and I was, coming on TV, and in her words, she didn't want to look fat. But then that makes me so sad because that, that shouldn't be your way of thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all have points in our life where, maybe we don't feel good in our body. And maybe, sure. I know for me with my past things, I have like really framing my mind in a way of like, I don't feel good in my body right now. So like, and I know moving my body helps me feel better, eating better. You know what I mean? Like it can help you feel better. But contextualizing it in a way of like, I don't want to look fat on TV. It just shows that there's still, I think, some unhealthy thinking there. And it just, it made me sad to hear her say that. And then as you saw, like she was experiencing some real serious side effects. I mean, I think in the early episodes, I can't remember, one of them was like, kept saying like, Macy, are you eating? Like, why aren't you eating? Yeah. She was not eating at all.
Right. Because, and that's what Ozempic does, right? It shuts down your appetite, and so for some people it's life-saving. So I'm not judging that. And I also appreciate you brought out a very important point of compassion, right? Is that she's honest about it. And I think that's important, right? To be honest and to be open and to have those conversations. It was just, again, me wanting to hold her beautiful face and say, Macy, my love, you are so talented. Please just give yourself a break, because I think how we talk about our bodies is so important and it has such huge consequences.
It is. And it's sad too, because I do get what she's coming, especially like the media, people for some reason, news fact, bodies change. And especially when you get older. So I'm sure her going back on TV, she's like, well, crap, if people haven't seen me in a while, all that, you know what I mean? Like, that's what people love to talk about, especially with celebrities that they haven't seen for a while. Oh my gosh, they look so much older, or their body looks different. And so I can't imagine that. Like, I just know sometimes how I feel with myself, like, and I'm not famous. So like being in the social light, like, I think that is such, a huge thing too. Because that's what, people get comments like that on these shows, like, oh my gosh, they look so different. I'm like, well, yeah, she's how old now? And you know what I mean? Like when she first started, how old was she? Like, people change. It's okay.
Right. But also to your point, for women, when women bear children and go through menopause And
yes.
it's like one day in my 30s, I woke up and I'm like, why are my hips 2 sizes bigger and I can't fit in my pants? That literally my hips unhinged overnight. And I was like, well, okay, this is just part of being a woman and our bodies change. And so I think the point is that to just, if people listening to this, you know, I've been hard on myself. I know you've been hard on yourself. It's universal for women, but let's have some compassion and gratitude for what our bodies have carried us through.
Yes.
And like you said, all we can do is take it one day at a time, be as compassionate to ourselves as we can, move our bodies, do something that feels good, not starve it. You know, like that's not, you know, a great solution.
Yeah, we're not, I feel like societal wise, we're not really framed, like our mind isn't framed to think that way. It's very much like, oh, you need to quote unquote, like look good. The standard of like what looking good, instead of being like, no, like it feels good when I move my body and it feels good when I eat broccoli. But you know what? It also feels good when I eat pizza. And you just gotta find that you know what I mean? Like moderation, and some days are better than others. And so I think, you know, Macy's such a hoot too, because you can tell the girl, she does not like to talk about her feelings. She does not like to talk about her thoughts. And when other people talk about her feelings, she wants to wrap it up. And I just got to quickly say, in episode 1, they're playing Uno and her and Tyler getting a fight because they were presented with the challenge where they had to talk about something. And Tyler was talking. It was like an emotional thing. Tyler was talking about it. And Macy, I get it. She was about to win Uno. And she was like, I don't want to quit Uno. And I'm competitive when it comes to games. So I'm like, I get it, girl. But it's so funny because you can just tell she was like, she does not like to talk about her feelings whatsoever.
In my notes, I have, she seems allergic to feelings. And so listen, to her credit, she does towards the end, towards later episodes, she says, I'm very guarded. I have a hard time with feelings.
Yeah.
And here's what's interesting about that is I can understand and appreciate that that's just not her jam.
No.
And I also feel like what happens for Maisie is she gets overstimulated.
Yes.
Truly, I'm like, if she doesn't know this about herself, again, I wish I could tell her, but the cameras are constantly rolling. You can't go anywhere without being filmed. Your mic packs are always on. People are talking about their feelings. She's having a hard time. She's having Ozempic side effects. And I'm like, she is on the struggle bus.
Yeah.
And so I think that she's getting overstimulated and she's just like, can we just get through this without having to talk about our feelings 4 hours a day? Because Tyler, here's the thing about Tyler. He loves a feeling, honey.
He loves to talk about feelings.
Even more than me, I think. I think Tyler takes the cake.
I love Tyler. He has been through it. And that's what's so great about this show is a lot of these people their fame came in like the early 2000s where, I mean, talk about media now. You had some toxic, the 2000s, the favorite thing Perez Hilton and people like that, the two things they love to talk about, women's virginities and men's sexuality. And unfortunately, those are still things today that people, especially when it comes to men's sexuality, people love to talk about. But Tyler Posey was one. I remember this. It was the media very much tried to out him, and he talked about that. And he wasn't ready to also, it's not even so much he was ready. He was truly still trying to like find himself and what he liked and what he didn't like. And that's none of our business to find out. And so Tyler, I think from that point, like really had to start doing the damn work when it came to his feelings. So you can just tell that he meditates in the morning. Like he really does it. And so, which is funny because him and Macy, the first episode, actually kind of like bonded first. But then Macy was like, oh boy, you talk too much about your feelings. Like I can't handle it. And I hope we hear Macy talk a little bit more because, you know, with her being in the music industry, which the music industry is a very dark and can be a very toxic place. I mean, Allie, from Fifth Harmony, she even talked about how I think it was a producer who told her to come into his room. So again, you get these like little nuggets from the show. And so it'd be interesting to hear, you know, Macy talk about the music industry, and if she doesn't, that's fine. But that's what I think is so great about the shows, again, when they're just at the house, they just start talking about these things. And a lot of these people came to fame in these really crazy times. So like hearing them talk about it and break it down, I love it.
I mean, you just summarized it so well. And here's the thing. I feel like we could go on and on about this, but we can't anymore. But you got to put your child.
But please, Surreal Life, sponsor your Bish Therapist podcast, because we are plugging you, and we will tell everyone to watch your show.
And here's the thing, Lyndsay, what I would love is for you to come back, and so maybe after the finale of the Surreal Life, we can talk about it again, because I think there's like 1 or 2 more episodes.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know.
Probably, yeah. Since it's only 2 weeks, there can't be that many more.
Yeah, right. You would think. But I mean, there's so much we still didn't get to touch on. But listen, as always, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you always for your compassion. And you just always bring up such amazing points too that I think is really important. So thank you for everything you always bring to this podcast. I just adore you.
Oh, thank you. And I adore you too. I literally could chat for you. Me and Melissa, we're very interested, I think, in the same thing. So I literally could chat with you for hours. So again, thank you so much for having me on. And truly, I will come on anytime.
Okay, perfect. So, but please, before we end, plug, promote, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Vanderpodrecaps. And keep watching out. I'm still obviously doing recaps over there. VPR is in a weird place right now. Is it coming back? Is it not? But now I'm doing other recaps, other Bravo related recaps. Love Island, right? We're different. And also stay tuned, because me and Brady might have some fun announcements. For those that don't know, Brady is my bestie, and he does the graphics on my page. So just stay tuned, because hopefully we can make a fun announcement soon. But yeah.
Oh, girl, I love a fun announcement. Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to leave y'all hanging. I just want to say thank you again for listening. Please check Lyndsay out. Check out Vanderpodrecaps. Please give Your Bish Therapist podcast a 5-star review. Check me out at Your Bish Therapist on Instagram and TikTok. I'm trying not to be elderly, but, doing the best that I can. And as always, thank you, all of you, for your love, support. I just adore you all. And please remember to take care of yourselves and each other. And we'll say ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.